Chapter 376. Nash strode forward and crouched beside Yasmin, his hand grasping the worm immediately. Yasmin instinctively grabbed Nash's wrist as she stared at the man intensely. Her cheeks were as red as apples. The onlookers, however, understood Nash was dealing with the death worm and had no other ulterior motives. Nash channeled his energy secretly, enveloping the death worm with it and then compressing it. The death worm immediately spat out purple fluid, its 20 pairs of legs flailing and leaving marks on Yasmin's smooth thigh. Ugh! Yasmin clenched her teeth tightly, enduring the burning pain. "Get some alcohol," Nash said, voice deep. He then tore open Yasmin's pants with his bare hands. Her fair thigh was already red and swollen. The deathworm's purple blood seemed to be bubbling on her skin. Bradley grabbed the half-empty bottle of Cattleton liquor from the table, unscrewed the cap, and handed it to Nash. Using his hand that was adorned with a dragon-shaped ring, Nash grabbed the bottle without hesitation and poured it onto Yasmin's wound. Ow! Yasmin let out a piercing, agonizing scream. Margaret and Derek winced. "Yasmin, bite my arm." Derek rolled up his sleeve, offering his muscular arm to Yasmin, moving it near her mouth. Without any hesitation, Yasmin sank her teeth into her brother's arm. "Fire," Nash requested. Bradley took out a lighter and handed it to Nash. Yasmin shook her head frantically. "No, don't." The fire would undoubtedly leave scars on her, and it was a devastating notion for a young lady. Ignoring Yasmin's pleading eyes, Nash ignited the alcohol on her wound with the lighter, causing blue flames to shoot up. Yasmin was in excruciating pain, her teeth biting firmly into Derek's arm. Derek pressed his lips together, but beads of sweat had formed on his forehead. The pain in his arm was nothing compared to the heartache he felt for his sister. Yasmin was drenched with sweat from the pain. Her eyes had also turned white, and she was on the verge of passing out. Nash felt helpless as well. He could have blocked Yasmin's pain receptors, but the deathworm's poison would become more active if she had no reactions at all, as it would mistake her for a lifeless body. After about 3 minutes, Yasmin's thigh had turned black from the fire. Margaret sobbed uncontrollably. "My poor daughter." Nash examined Yasmin's wound. After confirming that the toxin had not entered her body, he finally let out a sigh of relief. There were more than 1,000 types of poisons in the world, and the deathworm's toxin undoubtedly ranked among the top 10. Without prompt treatment, Yasmin would have died within 3 minutes. Even profound reality realm martial artists would face certain death without any hope for survival if they were plagued with a deathworm. Yasmin's face was pale as she convulsed. Derek held his sister in his arms, comforting her tenderly. "It's okay. It's okay. Don't cry." He then turned to Nash and asked, "Mr. Nash, what in the world is that thing? Is its poison really that frightening? Even a cobra's venom isn't that deadly, right?" Nash looked at Bradley and smiled faintly. "This? You'll have to ask old Perry." Bradley sighed. "Rascal. Go close the door." Nico heard this and went over to close the door. To everyone's astonishment, however, Bradley dropped to one knee out of nowhere without any hesitation. He said, "I, the 128th generation head of the Seekers Hall, pay my respects to you, sir." Margaret's family was dumbfounded, while Nico and his mother were left in disbelief. Chapter 377. Another woman was left wide-eyed and dumbfounded. Bradley, a highly respected figure in the entire neighborhood, was actually kneeling before this young man who was just in his 20s. Nash, on the other hand, was not surprised at all. He had suspected earlier that Bradley was a member of the young family's Tomb Seekers Hall. Nash had deliberately revealed to him his young family token when he received the alcohol from him earlier. "Old Perry, please get up. There's no need for formality." Nash helped Bradley to his feet. Finally, he found a living member of the young family's trusted circle. He even turned out to be from the Tomb Seekers Hall. The young family got their wealth from raiding tombs, and the fact that Bradley was the leader of the Tomb Seekers Hall indicated he held a high position within the family as well. "Grandfather, what's going on here?" Nico asked with confusion as he looked at his grandfather. This guy had just taken advantage of Yasmin earlier, And Nico had been thinking about teaching him a lesson when the opportunity arose. He never expected his grandfather to kneel before him. How was he going to do that now? Ophelia, go get Dacus to buy 3 coffins, Bradley instructed, dismissing the woman who had nothing to do with the young family. Then, he sat down and said to Nash, "Sir, please have a seat." Nash sat down on the nearby sofa. Derek helped Yasmin next to him. "Seeing how you're from the young family, I suppose you already know who they are," Bradley continued. "Both Caleb and I were from the young family village. The Tomb Seekers Hall is divided into 2 branches, the Tomb Hall and the Seekers Hall. The Seekers Hall is responsible for seeking out auspicious burial sites, while the Tomb Hall is in charge of excavating it. When disaster befell the family back then, I happened to be searching for the tomb of the Medicine King in Xanthalos and was following a lead. That's why I wasn't able to return to the village in time and escaped with my life," Bradley said with a bitter expression on his face. Nash lit a cigarette and asked slowly, "So they all went to the King of Medicine's tomb?" His master had mentioned the King of Medicine before. Leopold, a renowned physician from the Northern Dynasty, was not only highly skilled in medicine but had also acquired the divine farmer's legacy. His master had spent 3 years searching for the King of Medicine's tomb but never succeeded. Who would have thought that the Tomb Seekers Hall would have managed it instead? The Tomb Seekers Hall started searching for the King of Medicine's tomb over 200 years ago and only confirmed its location to be in Xanthalos about 30 years ago, Bradley explained. Other tomb raiders got wind of this information and were keeping a close eye on us, which prevented us from making a move. We had no choice but to cooperate with them. We spent several years leading them out of Xanthalos. After the massacre, I went under for more than 20 years. I waited until a few old foxes had passed away before deciding to take a look at the tomb again. 7 days ago, I took my son, my nephew, and a descendant of my old friends to the tomb. While digging our way in, we stumbled upon an undead corpse. Bradley shivered with lingering fear as he recounted. Undead corpse? What's that? Zeno gulped and asked. Could it be the kind of creature I saw on TV? The one without skin and covered in blood? Undead corpses are also known as grave spirits, Bradley explained. They're evil creatures created by sorcerers using the blood of the tomb's resident. They possess immense power, are impervious to weapons, and sustain themselves on dark energy. His eyes narrowed as he recalled the scene from the day before, which caused cold sweat to break out on his back. He continued bitterly, "After leaving the King of Medicine's tomb, I warned them not to set foot inside the tomb, but they went there secretly. The Tomb Seekers Hall typically operated with both the Tomb Hall and the Seekers Hall working together. First, the Seekers Hall would locate a tomb before passing it on to the Tomb Hall for excavation. Tomb Hall members were individuals with unique abilities, so some of them had methods to deal with undead corpses. However, with the Tomb Hall and the young family both destroyed, they had not been able to find anyone with the necessary skills. Bradley was unwilling to let the Tomb Seekers Hall had been seeking out for over 200 years go unexplored. It was why he decided to take a chance with his group. However, he ended up making a grave mistake. Feeling guilty for a moment, Bradley then continued. Undead corpses are usually placed in the antechamber of the tomb, which is separated by a passage with the tomb passage at the front. The tunnel we dug up led to the tomb passage. In theory, we shouldn't have awakened the undead corpse, so I suspect that someone had been to the King of Medicine's tomb before us. Chapter 378. Did someone locate the tomb of the King of Medicine? Nash furrowed his brows. The tomb was no ordinary place. The undead corpse and death worms inside it must not be released. If it was an archaeological team, it was highly likely they would lose their lives. If it was another tomb raiding group and they failed to handle the undead corpse and death worms properly, the people nearby would also be affected. Aside from me, There are two other people part of the Seeker's Hall who are still alive, Yosef Stone and Ender's Law. Both of them are skilled in the art of ley line identification as described in the Seeker's Hall scripture. Yosef left the Seeker's Hall with the former leader's permission to join the National Archaeological Team, while Anders left without permission and has been missing ever since. If Yosef found the tomb, he would definitely have notified me in advance. So, I suspect it's Anders who found it and attempted to raid it. He's an unscrupulous man. If he gains control of the grave spirit inside the tomb chamber, it could spell disaster for the region. Bradley gripped his tobacco pipe tightly, his expression worried. Zeno rubbed his hands and said, "Then, we need to prevent it from happening. We should head to the tomb immediately." Bradley smiled bitterly when he heard what Zeno said. "My son learned how to identify ley lines. My nephew was also a tomb raider officer, while Ophelia's husband was a descendant of the Queen of Grave Robbers. All three of them possessed unique skills, yet they all met their demise. What else could be said of you?" Zeno glanced at the three corpses on the woven mat and then looked at Nash. Whether or not they head off for the tomb was Nash's decision. Nico and Derek looked eager but were also filled with apprehension. Margaret shot Derek a fierce glare and said, "If you dare to go tomb raiding, I'll break your legs." "Mom, you're giving me too much credit. It's somewhere even Mr. Perry hesitates to go and you think I have the balls to do it," Derek quickly responded. "Old Perry, why don't you report the tomb to Yosef and have the National Archaeological Team excavate it?" Nash asked. Bradley nodded. "All right, I'll call old Yosef tonight." In the afternoon, Dacus bought 3 coffins and brought them back. The community then began to set up the memorial hall while Nash and Zeno headed back to their residence. Then, evening came. Nash planned to pick up Hera from Baroque, but just as he was preparing to leave, Hera called. She sounded anxious as she said, "Nash, my grandfather is in critical condition. My parents and I are going. We didn't have time to inform you given how short notice it was. You should have taken me with you. I am a miracle doctor," Nash said with a wry smile. Lauren was in her 40s, and her father was, at most, in his 60s. His condition clearly was not a natural one. If Nash went, he could definitely cure the old man's illness. "I've never visited the Mayer family myself. I still don't know how the family situation is. We'll notify you whether or not you need to come once we assess the situation," Hera informed. She had thought about bringing him along, but she was also afraid that her grandfather would offend him by treating her family unfavorably. "Well, let me know what your grandfather's medical condition is when you get there." "Got it. We're boarding now. Talk to you later," Hera said before quickly ending the call. Nash got out of the car and headed toward the villa. He then made a phone call to Brian. "Grandmaster, are you busy these past few days?" "Not too busy. What's going on?" Chapter 379. Go to the Mayer family in Capitan and see how the old man is doing. "Okay. I'll go there early tomorrow morning." "Don't wait until tomorrow. Go now." "All right, Grandmaster." Brian was having tea with Zachariah but immediately realized the gravity of the situation when he heard Nash's tone. He hung up the phone and promptly booked a flight. In the evening, Nash, along with Zeno, Melody and Finn were sitting in the living room for a meeting. Raiding tombs and Xanthalos, Melody stared at Nash in shock like she was looking at a monster. Then, as if realizing something, she asked with amazement, "You guys found people from the Tomb Seekers Hall?" Zeno grinned. "We did. We found them. We even found out about this huge tomb. But Mr. Nash, why did you ask Bradley to get Yosef to invite the National Archaeological Team as well?" "That was just to deceive Margaret." "You're planning to take Derek there too? Is that no good?" Nash asked in response. "What can that idiot do there?" Zeno shrugged. "You don't need to worry about that," Nash teased, and Zeno pressed no further. Melody glanced at Finn, who still had bandages on his body. She said, "Maybe Finn should stay behind. He'll just be a burden in his condition." Finn immediately shot to his feet from the sofa when he heard that. "What's wrong with me? Am I not fine now?" The medicine Nash prescribed was quite miraculous considering how he had almost recovered after taking it about 2 to 3 times. Back at Margaret's house, Yasmin's leg was bandaged up, and she was currently chatting with her mother on the bed. The Young family is very generous to give away 5 million just like that. My daughter will also be the CEO of the company in the future. Our hard days will be behind us, Margaret said, unable to stop smiling. That's Mr. Calcraft's company. I won't take a single cent of his money. It's enough that he's given me the chance to practice. What nonsense are you saying, child? That tattered map is definitely the Young family's treasure map. Do you know how much wealth the Young family had during their peak? Margaret boomed. 50 metric tons of silver. I might not have been able to go to school, but even I know how much that's worth. And that's just a drop in the bucket for them. Margaret looked unhappy as she continued. Your grandfather worked hard his entire life serving the Young family. He might not have achieved much, but he certainly put in a lot of effort. When he came back to see me, however, he had nothing to show for it. This money is just compensation from the Young family. Why do you think my great-grandfather had so much money? Why do you think he wanted to distance himself from Grandpa? Yasmin pouted and asked. Well, Margaret lowered her head. She had grown up with her uncle, and her father used to send money back every year. Her grandfather had all that money, but he was never kind to her. He even claimed that her father only sent a few $100s. However, back in those days, $100 was equivalent to several months' worth of salary for an ordinary person. It was not until her father returned and got into an argument with her uncle, even severing their relationship, that she learned he had been sending back his earnings, which were over $8,000 a month. Her eldest uncle was currently a prominent and wealthy figure in Capitan, while Margaret and her children could only live in a slum. The Young family had not disappointed her family in any way. As long as I work hard, Mr. Calcraft won't mistreat me. I'll be able to earn a monthly salary of millions one day. Moreover, the company is a pharmaceutical company, just like my uncle's. Yasmin's expression turned cold, her eyes narrowing when she thought this. You have the final say. Go and do your best then. I support you, Margaret said with a bitter smile while shaking her head. Yasmin, Mom, you guys should rest early. I'll go help out at Nico's place. Derek's voice came from the living room outside. Derek went to Bradley's house. Dacus was busy tending to a group of people. Derek was about to help when Nico, dressed in morning attire, suddenly pulled him aside. Derek, my grandfather is planning to go to Xantholo's. Will you come with us? Chapter 380. What? Derek looked around nervously and then asked. Your father just passed. Why is your grandfather in such a hurry to meet his end? Nico frowned and chastised. Hey, watch what you say, will you? Derek scratched his head and replied. I'm just a guy who didn't even finish elementary school. Are you really expecting me to say something profound? Nico shot Derek an annoyed look before whispering, Mr. Nash asked us to ask you if you're willing to go. We won't force you if you're not. Derek hesitated, worried that his mother might break his leg out of anger. Nico continued, We're all trusted descendants of the Young family. As the current head of the family, Mr. Nash is determined to restore the family. If we do good now, we'll surely become senior members of the family in the future. Do you know how much money my grandfather has? How much? Derek blurted out. Nico held up 2 fingers. 2 million. 2 million. Derek was unimpressed. His younger sister now also had 5 million. 2 million was nothing in his eyes now. Take another guess, Nico said. 20 million? Nico's expression changed slightly. Keep guessing, Nico replied with a smirk. Wait a minute. It can be 2 billion, can it? Derek was on the verge of shooting up to his feet. 2 billion was equivalent to 40 sets of 5 million. People often daydreamed about winning 5 million in the lottery. 2 billion meant their dreams would come true every day for a month. Your numbers are still too conservative, Nico said with a wry smile. 20 billion. Derek felt his mouth go dry, and his eyeballs felt like they were about to pop out. 20 billion. Nico took a deep breath. It had taken him a long time to finally get an answer from his grandfather. After 20 years of being poor, he never imagined he would become a billionaire. Derek nearly fell to the floor. Derek was so shocked that his legs gave way, and he ended up sitting on the ground. 20 billion. Would a ruler be enough to measure the length of this balance in a bank account? Derek, Go back and talk to your sister. She'll regret losing me as her potential partner if she lets this opportunity slip by. Bradley added before abruptly slapping Nico on the back of his head. Idiot. Go watch the memorial hall. Nico rubbed his head and said, I was careless. The candle smoke is too strong today. I didn't even notice the old man approaching. Bradley pulled Derek up from the ground. So, that little rascal told you everything, right? Yeah. He told me everything. Derek was extremely nervous. He was standing in front of a billionaire with a wealth of 20 billion. Have you thought it over? Bradley asked. I'll go. I must go. I want to become a trusted member of the Young family. I want to be a billionaire with a wealth of 20 billion. Derek said firmly. You should think carefully. It's very likely that if we go, we might not come back. If you die, what will happen to your mother? What will happen to your sister? Bradley asked calmly. I'll go back and discuss it with my mother first. Derek could not make up his mind. He turned and walked back home. Not long after he left, Zeno approached them, carrying a mineral water bottle filled with pitch-black water. Old Perry, Mr. Nash asked me to give this to you. Drink this water and it'll cleanse the corpse poison from your body. Bradley accepted the bottle and opened it. Taking a sniff, a foul odor hit him in the nose. It was so bad that his eyes almost watered. Is this effective? He asked skeptically. You may not believe in yourself, but you must believe in Mr. Nash, Zeno said with a faint smile. Without hesitating, Bradley pinched his nose and downed the water. After a while, he felt a surge of heat coursing through his limbs. He even heard a crackling resembling firecrackers coming from his bones. Smoke began to rise from his graying hair, as if every pore on his body was opening up.